Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad. Tehami. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, while addressing the nation today, has said the incumbent government would hand over the matters of the country to a caretaker setup in August. Also, during his address to the nation, he said the journey of the government was that of returning to economic development and providing the relief to the nation that was stricken by inflation, floods and unemployment. Also, we have seen the IMF Executive Board has approved a 9-month $3 billion standby arrangement for Pakistan's economic stabilization, which the Prime Minister said was a great step ahead for the economic stability in the country. The IMF, after the approval of this particular standby arrangement, said that the program would focus on 4 key points that include implementation of the 2023 and 24 budget, a return to the market exchange rate, and appropriately tight monetary policy, also the progress on structural reforms. At the same time, we have also seen the IMF has also unveiled its assessment of Pakistan's economic performance, projecting a positive trajectory for the country. The finance minister has also said the IMF has deposited the first tranche of this standby arrangement in the State Bank of Pakistan's account, that is of $1.2 billion. Similarly, the United Arab Emirates has also deposited $1 billion in the State Bank of Pakistan's account, after Saudi Arabia deposited $2 billion in the State Bank of Pakistan's account. Also, we have seen the Pakistani currency, the Pakistani rupee, is gaining strength against the greenback. We'll be taking up for discussion all these matters. For that, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Mr. Faad Waheed. He's Senior Vice President of Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Mr. Faad, thank you very much for your time. Also on Skype, we are being joined by Mr. Abid Hasan. He's former advisor of the World Bank. Mr. Abid Hasan, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. Let me begin the discussion with you, Mr. Faad. Now, there are 4 key points that the IMF has talked about, specifically talking about the 4th point that relates to the structural reforms in areas that have been mentioned by the IMF that include the energy sector viability, governance of the state-owned enterprises, and the climate resilience, specifically talking about the energy sector viability, how to go about it, where to start from.
Well, it's a breather at this point with the IMF deal going on, and acceptability of the $1.2 billion into the Pakistani reserves. At the same time, when you say about the energy crisis, that energy crunch we have in Pakistan, I think the most important thing at this point is governance of this entire sector. In the past, we've seen hike of prices, and in the lieu of this IMF program, definitely there's going to be very sharp increase in the prices of energy. And what the government really needs to do is, we really have to cut down on the line losses. We really have to, step up the game on recoveries. We have to make sure, the payments are being made. We have to actually, the main crux of this entire condition is, the rising circular debt. So I think energy is one of the most highest, percentage-wise, is the highest participating factor in this. So this is going to be tough. This is going to be hard on the masses, but I think it has to be done. But at the same time, we have to understand and we have to create new avenues. Our government has to create new avenues for renewable energies, and we have to look at the other side of the ball now, because we haven't made any dams in the past 50 years. So I think it's very important that we as a nation and the government should understand the point where the IMF is actually telling us to make these structural reforms, because we haven't really worked on those. So I think it's time we have to commit to these reforms. We have to make sure our country responds to this.
So what are the reasons when you talk about the cutting the line losses and ensuring the recoveries? What are the reasons associated with having the line losses and not having the ample recoveries that add to the circular debt?
Well, most of it is political as well. When it comes to, we're equipped with a lot of things with NEPRA. So if we speak to NEPRA and we ask them, let's have prepaid meters installed in the premises, so that way a user will pay before they use the energy. So that's something that can happen, and that technology actually exists with NEPRA. It's just a matter of time how the government responds to it. But then again, there are specific areas where the government does not want.
How much is that thing doable regarding the prepaid meters? How much time and resources would that require?
I think as my discussion with the chairman NEPRA, it's a flip of a switch. So it's very easy for them. Mostly it'll take them a month or so to actually connect those dots. So
don't you think it's going to be a gigantic task of transferring the entire system?
Well, for residential in the first place, it's going to be for the residential in the first place, and that it has to be phased out. It cannot be done in a single night. Maybe it's easy as flipping a switch for the NEPRA people, but to actually implement that, it's going to take a lot of time. But if they can phase it out, that's one way to cut the line losses. And then we have other tools to also make these recovery better. We have to understand the systems we have in place, the discos that are operating in Pakistan. The lines are older than 20 years. So even if we replace those lines, that can actually account for a better
the
energy
replacement
usage.
of those lines also requires a lot of time, effort, and resources.
Exactly, that's where we have lacked in this past 30-40 years. The planning, it hasn't really taken up to the mark. Like we've expanded into population. As our population grew, we did not actually look down into the infrastructure and making it better. So I think a better infrastructure would give us a better edge over these line losses. And other countries have actually looked into it as bringing in new policies. If we understand the state-owned enterprises, they have to be eliminated because the state does not has to be in the business part.
I'll come to that part of how to deal with the
because that is something very
enterprises.
important as well.
Let me bring in Mr. Abid Hasan into the discussion, also former advisor at the World Bank. Mr. Abid Hasan, thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. Now, when we talk about the approval of the 9-month, $3 billion standby arrangement by the IMF for Pakistan's economic stabilization, it talks about the program that would be focusing on 4 key points. We are already discussing the 4 points, in particular the structural reforms when it comes to the energy sector viability. What's your understanding? What is required to start from in this particular energy sector to make it more viable?
So first, let's just give me 1 minute. Look, this is the issues or the reforms that the IMF program is trying to address have been around for 30 years. So we shouldn't, first, of course, we must congratulate government for making the program, providing a program that the IMF accepted as a good one. I wish it was done 6-8 months back. The whole relationship would have been far better. But anyway, I think what we have to ensure that the issues that have been around for 30 years, energy sector, bad pricing, poor governance, fiscal side, bloated expenditures, bad expenditures, tax side, we have a very sort of flawed tax system where unproductive activities like buying plots is the best economic activity in this country for 30 years now, or whatever. All that, plus there are a host of other things, which are necessary for our economy, for this country to get out of this mess that we are in for the last 30 years. All of this will require long, many years of very painful adjustments. And for that, I think we need, this government has been saying, we need some kind of societal consensus on structural reforms. I'm not calling Charter of Economy, I'm saying Charter of Reforms, starting with institutional reforms. Rule of law, constitutionalism, political stability, this for 50 years, political victimization, that has to end. We need political stability in this country. Every 3 years, there's a new government. This Pakistan will continue going down the hill if we don't have stable political governments, which are then accountable. Unfortunately, accountability within government for poor use of resources, there's no accountability. Nobody in government, and I've dealt with the government of Pakistan, I've dealt with many governments in my career at the World Bank. Nobody in Pakistan loses sleep for something going wrong. That has to change. So, energy sector, you came back, look, for 50 years, we have had a very bad pricing policy. We've been subsidizing everyone and then using the budget to pay up for the losses. Gas is a classic example. Up until 1995, we were 100% sufficient in gas. 25 years later, 60% of our gas is imported. Why? Because we import, let's say, gas from Qatar at $10, but are selling it at $3 or $4. This cannot go on. We should pay our own companies $10 so that they invest in new fields, and so we can, reduce our. And this goes on in water sector. Now, this whole agriculture initiative is all about, I don't know what it is all about. There are some very major issues in agriculture. Just to take an example, our cotton crop has dropped by 1/3 in 15 years. Did anybody lose sleep on this? And getting now the state involved, I heard some other panelists of yours talking of the state. I think it's a bad idea to get the state involved in commercial activities. There is a saying, I think Greek saying, that Midas, anything it touched, turned into gold. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, anything the state touches turns into dust. So we have to be very careful, even in agriculture, that we should unleash the creativity of the private sector, correct the prices, figure out a way how farmers can increase their yields, reduce the water use. I mean, unless we price water, we will continue wasting water, and building more dams is not the answer. It's like a leaky bucket. You can pour as much water in a bucket. If it's leaking badly, water won't stay. So I think what's important is that we have within the political system, within all the stakeholders, a consensus on the key areas that we need to keep our eye on, stay the course, because it's going to take 5 to 10 years. And we will, during this time, we will continue to need the IMF. All this wishful thinking, in the past 30 years, we've had 20 programs, and every time a program got off the track, the leadership would say, this is the last one. Look, if history is any guide, we may be part of the IMF program, which is a good thing. Look, I do not trust on the macroeconomic management. I trust what the IMF says much more than I trust my own leadership, because they have a very poor understanding of very basic macroeconomic issues.
You already mentioned the agricultural sector. Now we have seen the state. You have also mentioned the intervention by the state regarding the commercial policies. When we talk about enhancing the agri yields and getting more productivity, there is the launch of the Green Pakistan initiative. It is basically focused on enhancing the productivity and also bringing in the foreign direct investment in this particular sector. So the state has to give some platform to a certain sector for it to thrive. What's your understanding of that?
Our priorities were dead wrong. What we should have done, what we should have encouraged was FDI in manufacturing. We encouraged FDI in all those industries which are earning in rupees with liabilities in dollars. And that's one of the reasons we are in a mess. We have to encourage FDI, it has to be in export manufacturing. Because remember, when somebody brings in $1 billion, his return on equity is 30%. He'll be taking on $300 million a year for the next 30 years. So, unless we think through these things, I'm not against FDI. I think we have to think through, what does this FDI mean? I mean, the people are making a big deal about this $10 billion refinery by Saudi Arabia. On the face of it, it's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea because they're demanding tax-free things for 30 years and, a deemed duty for 25 years. Look, if we have to attract foreign investment by giving them lollipops, that's a non-starter.
So what about this special, Mr. Abid, what about this special investment facilitation council? It basically focuses on inviting that investment. Also, as we have already talked about, is in the agriculture, also in the industry, minerals, energy and information technology and defense production. So it's a quite diverse mix of inviting that foreign direct investment.
All I'm saying is get the policies right, people will come. People are not, after all, Saudi Arabia is investing $50 or $100 billion a year outside Saudi Arabia. There are no special investment councils in Europe or USA or even Bangladesh or India. They got their policies right, they got their institutions right. Foreigners come where there's money to be made. But when you offer them the special things and special here and special there, look at FDI in India. Do you think they have all sorts of special zones and special committees? No. They got their policies right, they got their institutions right. And that's what we need to work on. I mean,
Mr.
so
Abid Hasan.
anytime a foreigner comes and you have all these special things, I think it's I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but it's a non-starter. They're coming in here to make a big killing and then they'll just leave on the next plane. So we have to make sure that the FDI is indeed good for Pakistan, good for the economy, good for the country. It increases exports, it increases employment. Those are the two main issues for FDI. We don't need a lot of FDI with pipes and this, that, and the other. What we need is FDI, which has huge employment creation, and secondly, huge exports. Only that is the kind of FDI we need. Let's learn from East Asia. Most of the FDI was in export manufacturing. Let's learn from Bangladesh. Let's learn from India. So, I mean, I think it's right. We must encourage and make sure that there are no administrative bottlenecks for foreign investors. But at the same time, our local investors must also face the same kind of, enabling environment. And you have to make the incentives right. Look, I mean, in a country where, as Atif Mia said, the only thing we produce a lot of is plots and apartments, which has no value in the rest of the world. We have to change that incentive so that our entire business community is incentivized to go for exports. And not the whole country right now busy is buying plots. This country can't go anywhere if this plot culture doesn't end. And why are they doing that? Because there are no taxes. You set up a factory, there are 100 people will come to your door every day, collecting taxes, collecting GST, collecting the withholding tax, some labor inspectors. You buy a plot, nobody cares. You can, multiply it several times in 3 years or 5 years, and you have such high returns that no other economic activity can match that in Pakistan. So I'm saying is, look, for this to, we need to get our heads together. We need to reflect. Pakistan is the only country which celebrates borrowing and celebrates even more begging. This is a time of reflection for everybody to reflect. Where did we go wrong? Why are we in this mess where every 1 year we go begging to our friends and then we,
Mr. Abid Hasan, that is exactly the point that has been made by Prime Minister in his address today to the nation, that it's now time to stand on our own feet and gain our lost position in the world. Mr. Abid Hasan, former advisor at the World Bank, thank you very much for joining in at Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. Mr. Faad, now talking about incentivizing the local business sector, your understanding of that, what's required for that, as has already been alluded to by Mr. Abid?
See, that is one point that actually we have missed in the entire budget as well. We haven't really incentivized the industry as a local. But if we have a SIFC set up, we already have parallel BOI set up. So that is something parallel. But if there's no heard or listening to the local investor, I think it's discouraging for him. And if someone from outside Pakistan is going to invest into Pakistan and going to make better money and get a tax holiday over a local investor, it's definitely discouragement. So I think they should work out a deal between both the countries, and somehow, and if I may second Mr. Abid on that, somehow we have to find a similar pedestal for both the investors, so that way they can gel in together. Maybe put up a deal for human resource development, or we can have tax holidays, but at an even number for both of these guys. So the local investor is also happy, the international investor is also happy, and that way we can frame it out. Okay, 10 years tax holiday, and then you have to continue for 10 years working in Pakistan, paying all these taxes. So that is another way. And I think similar thing happened in Gwadar as well. When we had the Chinese influence over there, they did not really pay attention to the labor laws. So that was something Pakistan missed out.
So we're talking specifically about this Special Investment Facilitation Council. Of course, it's going to invite investment in huge numbers from the foreign. Of course, it's going to generate economic activity. It is definitely going to enhance the exports. So it's a step quite right into the direction.
It is. I think it's the need of the hour, and I think the government has done the right job in putting down an SIFC. And it could have been done through BOI, but let's say, another program for better FDIs, and I hope, we're expecting more than 40 billion in this council. So yes, it's very important when the government will step in and the Prime Minister is going to endorse this, and our army has also endorsed this in management. So I think it's one hell of a project that's going to come up, and making sure when both the government and the army is going to be together on the same page, and they will be assisting throughout. So I think it cannot be better avenue. But SIFC actually has to work. We have to commit to SIFC. We have to make sure it works out, because all this FDI is going to come on the confidence of this government. And we have to understand, this 9-month program that IMF has, it's going to trickle down through 3 governments, the current one, the one in the caretaker setup, and the one that's going to be elected. So these 3 have to actually understand that we have to pay this money back. We have to ensure all this governance in SIFC and outside FIFC to make sure we're able to pay this, because we really have to work on the debt elimination programs now. We have to understand it's not going to go on forever. We cannot come back on this same stage after say 9 months of progress. But then again, these are the right steps that we needed in the long term, and I think implementation in this is the most important thing.
So what about a Green Pakistan initiative in order to facilitate this particular sector of agriculture, in order to enhance the agricultural productivity?
See, we have to understand how Pakistan works. Pakistan's history is agriculture. We're based out of agriculture, and I do second Mr. Abid on this. Down the road we've somehow lost track, and our neighbors have taken a better deal at it. So really and truly, we have to have these FDIs, and we have to understand that Pakistani land is very fertile. We have the best mangoes in the world, and out of 8 regions of the best rice growing areas, we own about 6 of them. So the basmati rice can be done, the salt can be done, we can grow a lot of wheat, and we have to conserve water. We haven't really made dams, so we have to understand the importance of dams. When every year, we're in the fear of floods, and last year we've taken a hit of about $30 billion in rehabilitation and restructuring.
So what's your understanding of utilizing the water in the most appropriate way?
See, we have to understand how to increase our yield per acre, and that is something we have missed, and we haven't actually understood. We haven't learned this from the West or the East as well, because we have to understand how to conserve water, use less, and get more productivity out of it. Most of the water that Pakistan used was actually spilled away in the Indus, and the Indus moves out to the Sindh River, so it's gone into the Arabian Sea. So that water is eliminated. We don't use that water. We don't create electricity out of it. We don't actually channelize that water. So we have to understand the cost of cold waters. We have to understand this. And if we talk about regional waters, so the warm waters, the waters where ships can go through, those are the much needed, and we're very fortunate to be located in this vicinity. So I hope and I think this is the right step, and this is the right direction that Pakistan is taking. But we really and truly, we have to understand, we have to implement on the same the vicious cycle that we have understood. We don't really understand at this point how we are managing this, but Pakistan has to come out of this.
So when Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif talks about expecting a huge volume of investment from the Gulf countries, in particular when we talk about the agriculture sector, he also goes on to say that the GCC countries annually import around $40 billion of agri products. So it's a huge avenue for Pakistani agri exports, isn't it?
It is, and Pakistan can be a breadbasket for all of these guys. All our neighbors are importing all these food items, and we are actually lucky. We are producing about 90% of these items in Pakistan. It's just a matter of transfer of technology and really and truly understanding research and development. If we have more research and more development towards our agriculture, I'm pretty sure all these countries won't look at the West, won't look at the East, but they will actually pinpoint Pakistan, because our ports are better. We have better, better located ports. We have better productivity on the land. So if that's able, and we're more cheaper, our electricity might be higher, but we don't need a lot of electricity, producing agriculture. So I think that's one more avenue and one more benefit to us being in this fertile land. So I think it's very important.
Right. Talking about Pakistani rupee gaining strength, after the approval of this particular standby arrangement by the Executive Board of the IMF. Now, it also talks about, out of those 4 key points, also talks about a return to the market-determined exchange rate. We saw that earlier imposition of a certain cap on the exchange rate was later on lifted as per the demand of the IMF. So, how do you think the authorities are going to deal with this particular key point out of those 4?
With this point, we have to be more fiscally responsible. We have to understand, and we really have to, understand the point of how to manage our foreign reserves. We are import dependent. We've been importing for the past 40 years now, and we've actually gotten a habit of importing stuff, and we're not really exporting that much. So every time we have a good news in shape of foreign aid or loans, we see a dip we see the confidence in the Pakistani rupee, but then again after a couple of weeks we start seeing the dollar gaining again against the Pakistani rupee. So that is something we have to understand, and we really have to see the part where we have to control both of these. We have to work on our export developments. We have to work on different avenues, just like remittances. We have to offer better rates at remittances. The parity between open market and the interbank rate in the past 1 year has been tremendously increasing in numbers. So 15 rupees to 20 rupee. So if that closed down, we actually lost about, according to one report, we lost about 4 billion rupees in foreign remittance this year. So that is something to worry about, and that is something to ponder upon, that where we went wrong. So if that happens and the free market comes in, it's going to be a little challenge, but I think it's the right direction. It has to be free. We cannot just hold on to it forever.
Right. You already mentioned the governance of state-owned enterprises. We've already discussed that particular area. It happens to be one of the key areas of those 4 points. Anything that you want to shed light on regarding this?
Yes, we really have to work on these SEOs. See, we're draining all this money. We're injecting money.
Only the non-profitable.
On the non-profitable, yes.
Right.
And the profitable ones can even be more profitable, I understand. With my understanding and my business thinking, it's definitely they can be turned around and, being into, instead of being the white elephants, they can become the cash cows. And that's where we are lacking. And I think we really have to put down the sword down, and we have to make decisions that, we have to privatize them, give it to the private sector, work out to deal with them, give it to maybe foreign investors, work out to deal with them. But really and truly, that has to become,
So when we talk about privatizing the state-owned enterprises, what do you think could be the major hurdle or the resistance regarding that?
It's actually the baggage that the government is carrying, because there's too much employment in those dead investments. Too many people on pensions, too many people, not getting salaries and not being working. So I think, that's one of the biggest challenges that the government has faced, because that's the policy isn't really there. If the factory closes down, they don't have a policy to actually eliminate those employees. So they have to work out a plan, phase it out in some way, and work it out. Because if they bring on board the private sector, even in these areas, and have a cooperation between the private sector and the government of Pakistan, and where the private sector can take the lead and make the decision, then that is a better, I think that's a better cooperation. And it can actually make it happen. If we go through down the history, or if we understand what the Pakistani businessmen are doing today, so if the steel factory of Pakistan is making billions and millions every year, so why cannot the biggest steel factory of Pakistan, the Pakistan Steel itself, not make billions? I fail to understand that.
Right, Mr. Faad, Senior Vice President, Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you very much for joining at News on News tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Thank you for watching.
Abid sahab ne to